You can, oh yeah, that's right. Just let me know where we're starting and you open already the page.
Products. And we said that the halacha of whether books or any written item, any document, is mukzah is dependent on whether it may be read on Shabbos or not. If it may be read on Shabbos, then certainly it's not mukzah. If it can't be read on Shabbos, then we have to start determining what will be its mukzah category, what will be its status. So last week we already began reading in chapter 307. I believe it was halacha 28. Let's see. Right, so we read halacha 30, which basically stated that all books that do not contain any relevance to Avodas Hashem, the service of God, and certainly books which contain prohibited matters which are forbidden to read, divrei cheshek, matters which entice the inclination towards promiscuity or any sinful behavior. So it's forbidden to read them on Shabbos. And being that it's forbidden to read them on Shabbos, and now we have to determine what would be their mukzah status. So let's look at Sif Chavches 28. This is translated over here in I, page 315. Kol ksav she'asar la'ayin le b'Shabbos, any writing or book that's forbidden to read on Shabbos, as we already emphasized, the prohibition is even in your mind, not just with your mouth. Imu chashuv be'einav, if it's important to you. U'makbid l'shtamish l'tzura pitzlu chizkiyetz v'zasotat. If you're careful not to use this for a use that can get it damaged, which is usually the case with most books that you haven't yet finished reading or you would like to keep for future reading. It is completely mukzah. So that's the rule. It's not just klisha malachta le'isr, but it actually goes up to becoming completely mukzah.
But if you stop halfway through that sentence, it was just met the first condition where it was also to read, but not
in that case, then it would be a klisha malachta le'isr. If you're not particular, we can see that in halacha 26. In halacha 26, the Alter Rebbe writes that regarding a letter, that even if you're not particular about this letter to use for other things and get it dirty, etc., and therefore it's not mukzah, nonetheless it would still be considered like a klisha malachta le'isr.
So that's the case where the letter, even if not, still is the status of the letter alone is enough to meet both conditions.
Again, this is following the classical rules we've already established. An item which is designated for forbidden use, and you're particular not to do anything else with it, is mukzah machmas ches and kiss, completely mukzah. So that's Sif Chavches, that's what we read in 28. In 26, the Alter brings an example of a case where you're not particular, but nonetheless it's designated for reading what you can't do on Shabbos, and therefore would be klisha malachta le'isr.
The first letter, not completely.
Exactly. So you can move it, so a typical letter may be moved for its space, maybe moved to, I don't know, you want to cover a bottle that doesn't have a cover with it, you can put a letter on top of it, etc.
So that would go for a book also, so that...
If you're not particular.
Yeah, if you're not about a book.
Correct. But it depends. If the book contains matters that are forbidden to be read, then seemingly it would be completely mukzah. It has no use at all. It's an interesting, okay, maybe we can say, unless you're present before Shabbos, top. Anyways. In Sif Lamed Aleph, so we mentioned last week that the prohibition against reading is, as we already said in Sif Lamed, is against anything that doesn't have a moral lesson that can be learned from it. And in the next halacha 31, The Alter Rebbe deals with whether this prohibition of reading would apply likewise to books of wisdom. So let's just see this inside. Yesh Eimrim Shasarum B'Shabbos Interactive B'Torah Yishamayim.
Where do you go?
31. I feel the Sifri Chachmas Asa. Shkol Seif Shem B'Srach Kedusha Yesh Ligzim Shem Shtari Adyotis. Fizeh Afilu Tatel Mosa. There are some Pesachim who rule that it is forbidden on Shabbos and Yom Tov to study anything other than words of heaven, fear of heaven, words of Torah, meaning that prohibition in Halacha 30 is not just towards nonsense books or books that have the prohibited writings even during the week, but towards any book that isn't about Torah and fear of heaven. And therefore they're all Mukzah. So a math book would be Mukzah and forbidden to be read. A science book would be Mukzah, forbidden to be read. Climate change report would be Mukzah, forbidden to be read, even if you hold it's true, because it's wisdom. If you hold it's not true, it's not wisdom. It's either 30 or 31, one of the two self-things, right?
You're saying here now that it's not even like Torah wisdom, it's often...
It's not Torah wisdom, right? So that's what I'm saying. So even if it's wisdom, it would be off limits according to this opinion. It would be Mukzah. The Yesh Matirim, however, there are Pesachim arguments say no. Anything that has to do with a wisdom, not just nonsense, not novels, but a wisdom, a chachma, such as books of medicine, and take it from there to anything else, mathematics, science, physics, etc. The Chacham never made a decree against reading it on Shabbos, and therefore, of course, it's not Mukzah at all. It's mutter to be moved.
We've got two opinions there. Which is the one that we land on in the end?
Oh, so we didn't get there yet.
Okay, let's go.
So the Alter Rebbe concludes the Alter Rebbe in the end concludes that the custom is to be lenient. Aminakul lahakel. If you see the continuation, 5 lines down, based on the second opinion, and therefore that's the halacha. The halacha is that it is permitted on Shabbos. We're not saying recommended, but permitted, based on the custom to read science books and any books of chachma. However, it is, and therefore it would not be muktzah. However, it is subject to an initial debate.
So when we're reading the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, he just did. He gets to the place where he says, he issues the final opinion himself. He has two opinions. And he says the Lamaisa came from here, the rule leniently, that came from right here?
In some cases, the Alter Rebbe brings a debate, a dispute, and he has to arbitrate based on his wisdom what he feels is the most correct opinion. In other cases, the Rav doesn't have to do that because the custom has already arbitrated. A main fundament in Jewish law is that the people get to decide. And how do the people get to decide? Not by doing a survey, but if the custom has already spread like one opinion.
What about
a minhag? Let me just finish this point, very important point that the Rambam emphasizes, that a minhag you say the custom of jury is a tremendous foundation. And it's interesting because you don't find this in any other law system. In any other law system, does a lawyer ever say, well, the country's already, many people, or most people in the country are already accustomed to this and this, so therefore that should be the way the law is. That's not right. That's nonsense.
Any case of that?
It's not that simple.
Not that simple.
When you're talking about advocating a change, where there is,
let's say we have a debate amongst judges. Let's say the Supreme Court is having a debate regarding a certain issue, if it's for or against the Constitution.
Yeah.
Would there be any merit to an argument saying, well, majority of the country is already accustomed to be lenient in this, so therefore it's not against the Constitution?
I think there is some of that, but let me ask you a different question. So, Baruch Spinoza.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. What about him?
Pardon?
Yeah.
Okay. Even though they put him in Cherem, but then we still, so there's a question about Yirat Shamayim. On the other hand, it's clearly a serious work. Yeah.
From what I know, Baruch Spinoza, his book is filled with apostasy. the Spinoza theory of creation. How can a person read such books? It's the very meanness. It's heresy.
Well, but it's
heresy. Obviously, is a person allowed to read books of Christianity or books of Hinduism? Of course not. It's even during the week the Rambam writes. There's an Isser min HaTorah. It's a biblical prohibition ever to read books of heresy. And the Rambam writes a very simple reason. I love his reason. He uses it all the time. He says, don't think you're so smart and you can understand what's going on. Every person has a different type of brain. One person reads this, gets convinced. Another person reads that, gets convinced. If we determine truth by what convinces people, then we would have a chaotic society. Truth has to be, and this is very contrary to a lot of people's philosophies. Truth has to be something which is truth, handed out for people who know. So if a prophet tells me this is the case, then it doesn't matter whether you understand it or don't understand it. This is the case. If faith says, according to Emunas Yisrael, believe in Hashkafa Pratis, then it doesn't matter if you currently understand it or don't understand it. That is our faith that we believe in, and the understanding may add towards your excitement about the faith, and may strengthen the faith, but it's not dependent on the faith. So the Rambam basically says that a person is forbidden from reading it, and this is, no one argues on it, this is a halacha on Shulchan Aruch. It's an isur l'sasuru achir v'ach v'achanechim for a person to read books of minas, for a person to read any books of heresy. Even a person is going to say, well, I'm just reading it to know, I'm reading it to debate others. When people wrote to the Rabbi, if they can read books of Christianity in order to debate Christians, the Rebbe said 100% it's an issur d'oraisa against Shulchan Aruch. It's a biblical prohibition.
For most people.
That was the letter. Biblical prohibition. The Rebbe told them you cannot.
The Rebbe encouraged the man Rishochet to dafka do it.
I don't know what exactly he encouraged him to do. We have to find exactly what he did. The status quo is that it's forbidden. But we can't quote, one second, let me just finish this. We can't quote what the Rebbe may have told someone privately, not knowing exactly what was quoted, to negate a halach in Shulchan Aruch, to negate Rebbe's home letters to people that we have printed. It's common sense. We have to follow what we know and what we see.
I was thinking of Rambam, right? There was a time when his books were banned and burned, but obviously something has changed, and now...
The Rambam agrees that if his books were books of heresy, they should be burned. The Rambam doesn't argue on that. He just argues that they're not books of heresy.
Right.
But no one argues on that in Spinoza. Everyone agrees Spinoza's books of heresy.
The piece of Rambam where he talks at the very end, it's in the final paragraph of Rambam, right, where he talks about how the Muslim religion and Yashka religion, it has a value for them because it keeps them out of trouble, they don't kill each other or something. Isn't that right?
100%. That is correct that there is a value in that, and that's right. Coming up tomorrow, we have tonight, Tes B'Tevis, very special day in the Jewish world regarding the Christian world, without elaborating. But nonetheless, that's for them. That's nothing to do with us. That doesn't mean that we should go ahead and involve ourselves in this. And as I said, the pasuk says, "What is le'surach v'achanechim? Do not stray after your hearts and after your hearts." We say this 3 times. We say this every single time we say Shema. Okay, when we say the Parsha of Vayemer, what are we saying there? So it's explained in Torah Shabbat Peh that the meaning of that pasuk is, do not stray after your eyes in terms of promiscuity, and do not stray after your hearts in terms of entertaining thoughts of heresy. We find that only the Sanhedrin was allowed to study the books of Minas for the sake of knowing how to paskin. That's what it says. They have to know how to paskin. So if they don't know what Avodah Zarah is, if they don't know what the Hindu practice is, then how can they adjudicate a case in which somebody was brought to them who practiced idolatry of Hinduism, but they don't know what Hinduism is? We're not allowed to read the book. So in that case, for the sake of ruling, they're allowed to learn. But stam for a person to pick it up, to read, even if he wants to read for the sake of negating it, is l'sasur achim. And this is, he said, the Rambam's teaching us that a person shouldn't be so arrogant to believe that he can really figure this out and know better than everyone else. You have a lot of people who, have arguments against the Torah or against religion or against God, God's existence. And a lot of times I tell them, when I get into discussion with these people, I tell them, Tell me something. Do you really think that all the Jewish leaders throughout the ages, do you really think you have better questions than they did? Like, do you honestly really believe? I'm not saying your question's not a question, which a lot of times they're not. But do you really believe that these simple questions nobody ever thought of before? Do you really think so?
Questions of what nature? What are you referring to?
Okay, let's continue. That's a shot.
What is astrology?
It's a chachma. Sure, it's a chachma. It's a wisdom.
But that's not an idolatry thing.
It's not idolatry. It's we're not telling people to go after it, but it's not idolatry.
If you go on to Crown Heights Info, there are 2 letters posted from the Rebbe on specifically that subject. Currently.
Recently? Recently?
Yeah, you'll see in the stuff from Rabbi Mendel's, from his letters from the Rebbe, letter in spirit or whatever it's called, that section, you'll find currently posted.
The Rebbe was against it.
I didn't open them. I was looking at other stories last night, but I saw them very prominently there.
Okay. Moving on, newspapers. So let's just summarize so far what we learned, and we'll conclude with newspapers. So what we said is that any book that's forbidden to be read on Shabbos, which includes all books of that do not contain any wisdom or Torah or fear of heaven or moral, like a regular novel, is forbidden to be read and therefore is Mukzah as well. Completely Mukzah. You have to move with the shiur. So if you left it on your couch or left it on your table, a lot of people don't know this. A lot of people don't know this halacha. Or they know and they don't believe it. A lot of people said, "What are you talking about? My father used to read novels on Shabbos. My grandfather used to read novels on Shabbos." You know, we've heard this before. A lot of people are not used to this halacha. They don't know this. This is one of the mitzvahs of Shabbos that, unfortunately, dashben ba'akvav, people step on it because either due to lack of knowledge or due to disbelief that it would be forbidden. I'm not turning on the light. What's wrong? I'm just reading. Okay? So if it's left around and you need to move it out of the way, use the shiur. You can't move it with a regular, you can't move it with your hands. A letter or any document of importance that you also cannot read on Shabbos is likewise considered Mukzah, completely Mukzah if you're particular.
Mail. For instance, mail.
So mail is a little tricky. If you already read the mail, you know what it's about and it's important to you, then it's completely Mukzah. If it's not so important to you, then it's still forbidden to read, but is not completely Mukzah. It's Kushmalach to the Issa. But if you don't know what it is, then actually it's not Mukzah yet. In other words, if let's say the guy delivered your mail on Shabbos, and without even asking you, he went ahead and opened it for you. So it's open. To open an envelope on Shabbos is a problem. But let's go to the case, he didn't ask questions, he already opened for you. He knows his Jewish client. So in such a situation, you are allowed to go ahead and read the letter, and the reason is because the letter may contain matters that pertain to your health. It may contain something of importance that is allowed to be read on Shabbos. You have no clue what it's about. Maybe someone's going to tell you, especially back in the day, the newspapers weren't so big. It may contain a matter that relates legufa. It relates to something of your body you need to know.
So a water bill. Clearly, you see that it's a water bill.
Yeah, so that's forbidden. That's forbidden, and you're definitely particular about that. But the truth is today that we see everything online. Many people won't be particular; they never even look at it. So then it would just be a klish malach to the isser.
A letter from a friend that's informative and sort of a wise advice from a letter from a friend. But you don't know that.
Right. So since you don't know what's inside of it, therefore, while opening it is a problem, nonetheless, it's if it's available to be open, it would not be a klish malach to the isser.
You wouldn't even get a lower status.
You would be allowed to read it. It's in Chafei, because some person will you're allowed to read a letter that was sent to you, and obviously it was already open, and you don't know what's written in it. Perhaps it contains material that's pertinent to your body. And in such a situation, so Rabbi here concludes, we are lenient to permit one to read it in one's mind. You shouldn't verbalize it because of the debate, but in your mind you can read it. But the point is that because of that, it wouldn't be a mukzah. Understand? So if it's a letter let's say it's a letter that is in the envelope and you don't know what it's about, then it would, in a case that it's not openable on Shabbos, then it would be completely mukzah because you're particular and you're not able to open it.
What's the case of not openable?
A regular envelope that's sealed.
But if it was flapped open already, etc., you could always, it's like the category of wisdom, I don't know if we're reading anything else.
If it's openable, it's already open, let's say, then yes, since you don't know, it's permitted to read in your mind. Okay?
Can you even touch it?
It's not open.
The letter's in the envelope,
closed
and
letter.
it's sealed, yeah.
Right. So let's work it out. Since it's forbidden for a Jew to open it on Shabbos, because of it, it's brought down that it's usher to open it on Shabbos. So therefore, and your particular would fall under the category of Mukzah Chasras and Kiss.
You can't even take it out of the mailbox.
You wouldn't be allowed to take it out of the mailbox. You would have to move it with a shiur.
I guess you don't know, if you can't open it, you wouldn't know if you're going to be particular about it though, I guess, right? So that's a little bit of a catch-22.
You're particular until you find out what it's about.
Oh, until you do, you could do.
Yeah.
So it could be something.
I don't take my mail.
Okay, the subject of letters in its entirety is under really a different subject of reading on Shabbos, which is its own chapter. But just for this, regarding Mukzah, so, those would be the rules regarding Mukzah. Regarding a newspaper, so the halach would be as follows. The Poskim the Poskim pretty much deduce a het of reading newspapers on Shabbos based on what we just learned earlier, that it's permitted to read letters on Shabbos because maybe contains material relevant to your health or to your bodily needs. And the same thing applies in news. I'm going to read, about the things that pertain to my health. And therefore, or, a war is coming, I want to know that I need to leave. So these things, safety. So therefore, based on that, the Yaakov and many other places can write that it's permitted to read newspapers on Shabbos, and we're not promoting reading newspapers on Shabbos. But Shabbos will be about, but a person doesn't have to protest against anyone who reads newspapers. This is not referring to the business section, okay? Not referring to the business section, and most likely also not referring to the sports section. What does that have to do with your physical health or safety?
But general news, you can see a headline, you see it's nothing to do with health or safety. You can't read those either, probably, right?
Right. So, yeah, they're getting that particular.
Can't help but see it.
So, but in general, the idea of reading a newspaper was already discussed in those times, is brought in this book. Now, what would be its status of a newspaper that you're not allowed to read? Let's say the sports section or the business section, that for sure has nothing relevant to you.
Comics.
Comics, right? So in those situations, it would be either Mukzah, it would be either Klisha Malachta Le'Isser, you're not particular about it, you're using the shmatas, right? But you just can't read it, so it's Klisha Malachta Le'Isser. Or it would be completely Mukzah if it contains material that's forbidden to be read even during the week. And the newspapers are not exactly clean of material forbidden according to Jewish law. Even a religious newspaper, if a religious newspaper, they don't believe in the Isser of Lashon Hara, and they have most of their paper, or even one article, it's filled with Lashon Hara against this, against that, against this, against that, then that newspaper is Mukzah Machmas Gufay, completely on Shabbos.
How do you come out with the Haredi magazines we have here in Tzfas?
So I don't read any of them. I don't know what they have in them. I'm assuming they have a rabbinical board, an advisory board that makes sure
they have news, particularly to the Haredi community.
Right, so that's not a problem. First of all, a lot of them are filled with Divrei Torah and Musar Haskel, and it's for sure okay to read. If they have a business article there, then that business article should not be read on Shabbos. But we don't have to forbid the entire magazine based on that. But if they have a section, you have created a newspaper, they have also business sections, then that section would not be allowed to read on Shabbos. It would have to be only, either Divrei Torah or matters of news that relate to you. It's not exactly the correct minute to read newspapers on Shabbos. Again, let's not get this wrong. We're not, people should, Shabbos is for learning Torah. It's the one day a week we get to be saved from the news. We get to, we get this immunity. So a person to bring it onto himself even on Shabbos is kind of strange. But from a halachic perspective, it's not forbidden in this case.
So if not completely schmutz, and it's just a category of sort of neutral health, whatever, then it's the lower light. It's not completely mukzah.
It's not mukzah at all. Health? Not mukzah.
Oh, that's right. So what's the situation?
Sports, the sports section.
That would
or the business section.
That would
Can't read it on Shabbos.
So that's not the highest level mukzah. That's the medium. What about a sports article? It's about like the Cubs winning the World Series. All these
right, I understand. So you can say
only the Cubs. Only the Cubs. Chicago
why,
Cubs are unbelievable.
That's why.
It's a non-issue because the Cubs will never have the situation.
They did.
For another 30
They
years.
did last
Not
year.
for another 30 years.
Another 30 years.
40 years.
So the higher level.
So that's why I said with sports, I said with a little bit of a hesitation because for some people, finding out the games, the scores, it's really negative.
Really,
it's
you're
relevant.
really owning Shabbos. Yeah.
But if they find out, what if they
been
find out
saying
they
that.
lost? As the biggest Moshe writes, what if they lost? It would be destroyed. The whole Shabbos would
Yeah,
be broken.
that's right.
So he says that you shouldn't. Anything will break your spirit on Shabbos. It's a problem.
That makes me one time walking by a store and there's a TV showing the news. Where does that sit? That's in the category, right?
That's what happened when the
You're not gonna touch
When
it.
the Mets won the World Series in '86. All the Baltimore in Crown Heights were looking in the
What
windows
about
to.
that?
No, they went to the cops who had radios on.
Actually, you just like see their news. I remember seeing like.
What is there again?
No, the thing where you see a TV and a TV store.
Well, that's not our case. Our case here is where you're picking up a newspaper
No, I
and
know. We're
reading.
curious. We're close enough.
Watching and just listening is not really any isser here. It's definitely no mukzah isser.
Right,
It's no
right.
isser of reading. You're not reading anything.
No.
You're just looking. But again, it's not in the Shabbos spirit to go ahead and do this. But is it forbidden? It's not. I mean, as a buffer, in Miami, following sports, I used to as well. 16, 17 years old. When there was a big game, a playoff game, it's on Friday night. So we would go with friends, and we would go, down 74th Street, stand outside a bar and see what's going on. But it never ended up well. My team always lost when I did that. The last time I did was it was the last game. I think it was Game 7 of Miami Heat versus the Knicks in the playoffs. And I said, I'm just going to come for the end. I went to the end, and they lost by a 3-pointer. Like the Knicks threw with 2 seconds left. I'm like, that's it, I quit.
Big mistake.
You also the Dolphins, you would probably glue to also. The Dolphins.
They don't play on Saturdays.
Oh.
They don't play on Friday nights. Okay. We're going to do now a general review of the entire Klisha Malach Del Isser. And this is going to, and then we'll just complete with some practical questions and answers, and we're done. This subject.
Oh,
No, this subject. Working our way to the finish line. Okay, so let's begin. Klisha Malach Del Isser, or as we've been calling it, Mukzah Machmas, is something that's Mukzah due to, that you can't do, that it's designated for forbidden use on Shabbos. So if it's designated for forbidden use and not also designated for permitted use, meaning its designation is only for prohibited use, then it enters stage 1, category 1 of Mukzah, which is that it contains already some limitation, which is you cannot move it to save from damage, but may move it for a permissible purpose or to use its current space. It is forbidden to move even this category Mukzah through placing a non-Mukzah item on top of it, unless it is a case of great loss. Once a person picked up the item, let's just use for argument's sake the example of a pen. It was in the way. Once I move it out of the way, or to scratch my back, I can then go ahead and put it down wherever I desire. I don't have to drop it right away as soon as the purpose of its movement is fulfilled. I'm allowed to do a trick and move it out of the way to save it from getting damaged, and in order to make that permitted, use its space or use it for a purpose, even though that's not my main intent. This trick is allowed to be done. You're also allowed to move an MMI object for the sake of another person using it even though you do not have a use for it, so long as that person is a Jew. Okay, the examples we already went through a lot. I'm going to skip those examples that we already went through. Let's go through some examples mentioned in other Sfarim that we haven't yet touched upon. A regular pen or pencil is a klisha malachta l'isser. Scissors are usually klisha malachta l'isser, as they are meant for cutting things, which is forbidden on Shabbos, either due to the isser of tikkun kli, which is usually the case, as we've discussed, right? You can't cut things on Shabbos with a scissor because it's designated to prepare them for a use. That's why usually people cut things, even if it's designated for cutting other things. It can be the isser of seiser, it can be the isser of kereya. Bottom line is that scissors are usually designated for forbidden use, and therefore there would be a klisha malachta l'isser. You wouldn't necessarily put them up to Mukzah and kiss, as people aren't so particular with scissors, unless it's a very special type of scissor, like a barber scissor. Then it would be Mukzah and kiss. Scissors,
For a barber,
for everyone.
for everybody.
Why not?
There
It's
are
Mukzah for him, it's Mukzah for us.
permitted uses, so it doesn't automatically.
What?
Scissors does have some permitted.
But is it that, right, what's its main designation? So if I have a scissor that's designated for cutting chicken, such a scissor is not Mukzah on Shabbos. I believe I did read in one sefer they wanted to write it's Mukzah, but the reason made absolutely no sense. That's what I remember, if I remember correctly from back then. Bottom line is that according to the rules, a typical scissor that's used for food scissor is not Mukzah, and it may be used on Shabbos, and there's no reason to be hesitant. There's nothing wrong with it. You have a knife, and you have two knives together, which is called a scissor. What's the problem?
So you could only use it for the cutting food, or you could use
I'm saying a food designated scissor,
Right.
or a scissor designated also for food and also for cutting things, which is highly not recommended. Keep food separate from other items. But if somebody has that, they have one scissor, they use it for cutting chicken, and for cutting food, and for cutting papers, then okay, it's not Mukzah. It's designated also for permitted use. And this doesn't mean you can use a scissor for whatever you want. You can use a scissor for cutting chicken, cooked chicken. You want to cut the chicken in half. You want to cut a carrot to pieces using a scissor. It's permitted to be done. But to go ahead and cut items on Shabbos is a non-problem with Mukzah, is a problem to complete the other issues I already mentioned. Matches is considered klisha malachta l'isser. It certainly is a vessel. It's been turned into a vessel. It's a piece of wood with something on top to allow it to light. But nonetheless, it's designated for forbidden use, so it would be klisha malachta l'isser. So if it's in the way, it could be moved.
in a match.
Yeah, a matchbox. Someone left a matchbox on the table. This happens often after candle lighting. The chatchila, she's supposed to light and say the bracha right away and not do any malach after it's lit. So she didn't exactly light the match. Take the matchbox to the kitchen and the cupboard and then go back and light the candles. You lit the candles with the matchbox there. And now what do? So the matchbox is considered klisha malachta l'isser, which may be moved if you need the space. So if you need the space on the table, it's not moved. Soap and shampoo would likewise be considered klisha malachta l'isser. It's designated for a purpose. It's forbidden to use it for its normal need, but it does have a permitted way of being used. For example, you can put it into water, and water it down, and put it on your body, not on hair. That's not a problem. Detergent is another example listed as a klisha malachta l'isser. It's generally, designated for washing clothing, which you cannot do on Shabbos, but you can technically use it for washing dishes. You can use it for other things as well. So that's its category. Even though this is where you can say it has no use on Shabbos at all. It's not a vessel. It's like poison. It has no use. But in fact, you have dish detergent, not anymore. Right? Remember dish detergent? Powder?
A powder.
For a machine.
No, for dishes. Washing dishes.
In a washing machine.
Huh?
In a washing machine,
Not in a dishwasher, you're talking
I'm
about.
talking
I
about
mean
dishes.
dishwasher, yeah.
They used to sell powder detergent for dishes.
Have you used it?
Used to be. Some people used to use it.
Roquette soap
Not in my day. Before my
for
day.
dishes.
How do I know about it? Because Sfarim that were written in the 70s discuss it. Can you use dish detergent to powder on Shabbos, and they write a whole paragraph about how it's used. So I guess it was around back then. Phone books, or any books that's forbidden to be read. Phone books is another example of a book that's forbidden to be read. If you need to look up an address on Shabbos, it's a problem.
It is?
Sure. Why would it be mutter?
Because I'm going to a Shalom Zachar and I don't know where they live.
Right. So, who says that you can look that up? I'll give you an example that the Alter Rebbe writes that you can't do. Look, if you wrote a list of guests coming to your Shabbos meal, and you want to know who to still expect, you can't read it on Shabbos. Even a guest list. Yeah. Chamed Gzeir. That's what we discussed earlier. It's a Gzeir against reading anything on Shabbos that's not pertaining to Judaism, Musar, or science, or wisdom. Now, how does that not pertain to your body similar to an unknown letter, or similar to a newspaper? I guess because it doesn't pertain to your health. I guess that's the difference there. Even a cookbook is discussed. It's allowed to be read on Shabbos. And Shlomo Zalman wanted to argue that perhaps it's considered a book of wisdom, as cooking is also a wisdom. Well, then he said maybe it's not really a wisdom, and therefore it would be forbidden. Okay.
And the bottom line?
He deliberates. I don't know if there's a bottom line.
But a list of what you're preparing for Shabbos, or a list of guests that are coming for Shabbos,
So that's a
would be
clear
clear
ruling in the Alter Rebbe.
something
You can't
that-
read it.
can't read it.
Yep. It's annoying. But that is what it says, that you cannot read a guest list on Shabbos. And if any of these books, of course, you're particular on, then it would go up a status, become Mukzah, Chesed, and Kiss. So a phone book that you're particular with would go up in its Mukzah status. Okay, a comb is also a Klisha Malachta L'Isser. A nail which you bang into the wall is a Klisha Malachta L'Isser. Cigarettes are Klisha Malachta L'Isser. Electronics, if you're not particular on all Klisha Malachta L'Isser, that's also under discussion. That's the bottom line halachawi rule. Drying clips that are designated for drying laundry, hanging laundry.
Clothespins.
Yeah, you're not a
Klisha Malachta L'Isser. If you use them for both laundry and for closing stuff,
potato chip bags.
yeah, then it's not designated for two purposes, one permitted, so it's not muktzah.
Not muktzah at all.
Yeah, we said if it's only Klisha Malachta is designated only for Isser. It's designated for both Isser and Heter, and it is not forbidden.
What was the category for clips? I just review it myself. What was the two? What was the
Electronics that you're not particular on.
what was that?
Watches, alarm clocks, fans.
So that's the lower
Klisha
level.
Malachta, yeah. A lighter, Klisha Malachta.
So we could
The fans you can move.
fans.
It's Klisha Malachta, so you can move it for the sake of being on you. You cannot move it for the sake of not being on you.
Nothing would.
Of not being on you. You can't move it away from you. If you're hot, you want the fan to be on you, you can move it. But if the fan is on you and you're cold, you can't move it because what, is
not
that
for your
Lagufa?
benefit.
Is that Lemekayimay? No, it's not for either of them. You don't have the mandate to move it. What you can do is tell someone who's very hot, do you mind sitting right over there and I'm going to move the fan on you? That's okay, because then you're moving it for him to get. But to move it away from you is a problem.
When you said legufo, you mean for the sake of the body. What did that mean again?
Lagufa means to use. To use it. It's not for the sake of the body. For the body of the item. To use the item. So to move the fan onto me so I cool off, I'm using the fan. It's mutter. It's Klisha Malachta L'Isser. I'm allowed to move it for that reason. But if it's bothering us to move it away, I'll have to do the trick of either getting someone else who wants it or the space. I need the space.
Or move it with your foot.
Or the shima. Yeah, you can always do the shima.
So back to the scissors for a second. That's the one that has a forbidden use and a non-forbidden use. So that mukes it all then. Because you can cut chicken with the scissors.
Yeah, but is it designated for it?
A designated chicken cutting scissors, even though it has a forbidden use also.
Well, if it's designated only for raw chicken, then it would still be mukzah because chicken is raw. Raw chicken is mukzah.
Ooh.
But if it's designated for
Cooked chicken.
cutting anything, Our kitchen scissor doesn't for cutting anything. It's not doesn't only for cutting raw chicken. Use it for cutting anything that needs to be cut. Any food that needs to be cut.
So that's not Mukzah then?
So it wouldn't be a mukzah. But if it's designated only for cutting raw chicken, and since its designation is to do something that's forbidden to do on Shabbos, it's an interesting case scenario. I don't think we've seen that before. You have something designated for a mukzah item, and there's nothing wrong with the mukzah item other than the fact that it's mukzah. Raw chicken, the only thing with raw chicken is the fact that it's raw. It's not a malacha. So do we say that an item designated for a mukzah item is considered mukzah, and based on the sources, which I'm not going to go into right now, the answer is it would be. So if it's designated just for raw chicken, then it would be a kli shalach l'issa. But if it's designated in addition to that for cutting other foods that are not raw, that are edible, not mukzah foods, then it would be okay.
Interesting. So Yaakov would use the scissors raw, not.
Okay. Let's see some questions we have here. Final questions. What is defined as moving an object for use of its space? What's defined as the mekayim other than its obvious translation of putting something in its area? So some places can learn that for its space is defined that you're moving it because you don't like where it is. You want this space free of it. So you don't have to make a use of the space so long as you don't want. In other words, not wanting the matches on your table, even if no physical vessel will be placed on that in that area, is okay. That's what some places can learn. However, from the Alter Rebbe, it's clear that it must be. You have to actually make a use. Move the matches, place a sitter down instead of the matches.
According to the Alter Rebbe.
According to the implication of the Alter Rebbe, because that is his wording. That's his wording. And so therefore, it's not enough to just not want. So the question really is like this. If I have let's use the match case or any kli shalach or item, which is in my living room on my dining room table, and I don't like looking at it on Shabbos. I don't want it there on Shabbos. It doesn't do with I need to use it right now for something. I don't want it there on Shabbos. It's not Shabbos. Can I move it? Is that considered for its space? I want its space freed from it so I don't see it.
So my eyes can enjoy the space.
Can you?
So that's what I said. Some places can say that it is considered for its space, and bottom line is that from the Alter Rebbe and other places can implication that it's not. You have to actually make a use of it.
If you're afraid your kids might get it,
And light the house on fire.
or whatever, they play with it.
So if you're afraid of just damage, then that's what we're saying. That's exactly the restriction of kli shalach this. You cannot move it to save from damage.
Or
That's
damaging
the case.
something else.
Well,
But
yes,
if
that
it's
makes
going to be
something
damage
else.
of sakana,
You're not damaging a matchbook, the
doesn't
matchbox,
matter.
you're
I
damaging.
understand. But if it's sakana, which match it certainly is, then of course, if you have children at home, you're allowed to move it on Shabbos.
You worry about it.
But if it's just adults at home, what's the worry? What is defined as moving an object for its use, legufay? What's defined as legufay? To use it. So I'll give you a case example of our question, where there would be a difference of how to understand what legufay means. Can I move? Can I move, let's say, a hammer, or can I move the matchbox, or can I move a nail on Shabbos for the sake of fiddling with it? I want to fiddle with it. I need something in my hands. The drasha is too long. I'm getting nervous and anxiety. I need to fiddle with something. A little nail to fiddle with. Is that considered the gufa? So the answer is no. This question is answered by the Aruch HaShulchan, who says the gufa here must be a productive activity, a real activity. So a person cannot take kli shalach items on Shabbos and juggle them. Oh, you see, I'm using them, lagufa, I'm using them for a purpose. Juggling is not considered.
What would be a purposeful, okay reason to move it, to use the matchbox lagufa?
To use it lagufa?
Yeah, to an example of matchbox. Proper window open, nothing else.
Take one of the matches and use it as an
Scratch your head.
Yeah, that'd be okay.
Or to scratch my head, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Anything you can
That's a
think of
real-
to match, to use that match for a legal purpose.
But on Yom Tov, a match is not mukzah, right?
match, why not? You can't light matches, you can only extend a fire, you can't light it.
So you can use the other end of the match to transfer fire from one.
First of all, you can use the front end of the match, there's no real issue with that. Just extending the fire, there's no issue. I know that for some reason.
But using a
there's
match
a
to do
misnomer
it.
that you can't light the front end of the match on the front end on Yom Tov because you're like lighting a new flame, but it's not correct. You're just extending a flame. There's nothing wrong with extending a flame on Shabbos. There's is to actually start
On Yom Tov.
I'm sorry, on Yom Tov, yes, on Yom Tov, on Shabbos, there's always.
What do you mean, extending the flame? I missed sort of what that meant. Extending the flame?
No, I was just mentioning, he mentioned the other side, so I said there's no need for the other side.
You have an existing flame already, you're just taking from an existing flame.
But the
So
match-
Can I light a candle on Yom Tov that contains, kerosene? Can I light oil on Yom Tov? Of course you can. Just because it's flammable and lights up doesn't mean that it's, anyways.
With an existing
So a match is not
flame, you
Mukzah,
light a
yeah, a
candle.
match is not-
Yom Tov is, well, no, but I'm saying, but what is it designated for? It's designated for the strike.
Yeah,
It's not designated for extending, it's there for the strike.
right.
So therefore, it would be a Klisha Malach sir.
Even on
You
Yom
can't
Tov.
strike it on Yom Tov. You can't strike it on Yom Tov. There's an issue there, abundant, right? But that's how you learn. You can't. But bottom line is, you cannot strike it on Yom Tov. And since you cannot strike it on Yom Tov, and that's its designation, therefore, it would fall under a Klisha Malach or category even on Yom Tov. And if before Yom Tov you say, I'm designated these matches as my extending flame, okay, you designated it, so now it's okay.
Moving a radiator on wheels, one of those radiators on wheels, to heat yourself up better, move to put a better position, that's okay, like you said before, that would be another example of the gufo.
Radiator for what purpose?
A radiator that you want to move into position and heat yourself up better.
Right, of course it's okay, sure.
Is that an example of a gufo?
Yeah, of course. That's how you can't get a better lugufa than that. You're trying to heat yourself up, sure.
But you can't move
Okay,
away
the
from
point
it.
is it has to be productive activity. Okay, here we're saying it has to be productive activity, not just to fiddle for pleasure. An interesting question, debate amongst poskim. If you have a permissible item available, it's not mukzah at all. For example, I have the nail, and I have a fork available, and and then whatever I want to do, I can do also with the fork. I can use the fork to scratch my head, or I can use the nail to scratch my head. In such a case, is it permitted to use the klish malach to this item or not? So this matter is under debate. Some places can say that it's only allowed in a case that you don't have a non-mukzah item available in front of you to do the use. While other places can negate this and say, no, it's not a problem, and this is practically the leaning approach that it is not a problem. And one of the biggest proofs it's not a problem is that it's a general rule in halacha. If you have a whole shulchan aruch, your entire shulchan aruch is dealing with a very common example, and it doesn't give you this very common stipulation to limit and restrict what it permitted, then most likely it's because he doesn't hold it. So let's, for example, the Alter Rebbe discussed this many, many times. The Alter Rebbe doesn't one time go ahead and tell us that, by the way, the whole permission I've been telling you time and time again to move a klish malach or item to use is only if you can't find a use with a non-mukzah item.
Right.
It's not like it's something rare. It's a common case. So even though there are places more machmir, the leaning approach is to be lenient.
Then you have to go running around. It could be hidden in a closet somewhere. You could
No, I think everyone agrees that it's only if it's easily available.
Right there.
Not easily available.
And there is an opinion that says that is the machmir. There is a more machmir opinion than people
Yes, the
hold
Mishnah
on.
Berurah, yes.
And so the Mishnah Berurah
And
guys
the
hold
Shmir
by
Shabbos
that.
Kuchos,
They hold by that.
yes, that is true.
Yeah.
It's a chiddush, it's a big chiddush what he writes.
The Alter Rebbe is a big thing.
No, the Mishnah Berurah writes the big chiddush.
Why is that?
He says, why is it a big chiddush? Because it doesn't say it anywhere in the stipulations. It doesn't stipulate anywhere that you can only move a klish malach l'isur for use if you can't find a use with something not.
Okay, that's the
The Chum and also it's not so logical because the Chum never made a decree. You found a use for The Chum let you even do a trick. They said you can go ahead and move for its space when you don't really need its space in order to save from damage. You go ahead and move for its use. You don't really need the use. You're just doing it to save from damage. So we see the Chum didn't really care so much as that. Do you really need the use? Do you not really need the use? So the Mishnah Berurah here is more on the defense of his opinion. Another discussion regarding switching hands. Some say that you cannot switch hands. Once it's in one hand, don't switch to the other hand. The Mukzah laws apply to each hand individually. So it's in one hand, don't pass it to the other.
One last minute. for a
That's the
question
final
on
ruling?
Shabbos question.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to time.
It's usually 1 minute.
The dispute, but if it's not necessary, it's better not. Huh?
Are you at a place where you could like?
Let's just finish. We're almost done.
Okay, fine. I'll ask this question later.
Okay, is a lamp muktzah? So if the lamp, like a table lamp, or a bed lamp, nighttime lamp. So if the lamp was not lit before Shabbos, then it would be a klishim after this. Then if it was lit before Shabbos, then it's completely muktzah. Because the lamp is a basis to the filament, to the flame, to the electricity. And therefore, just like a candle is muktzah, so too this would be completely muktzah, so it should be chassidza.
Which
However, it would be completely muktzah, just like a flame.
There's no. There's not a.
Why is that different than a heater?
A heater doesn't have the filament.
Sure it does.
Yeah, I think so.
Sure it does.
One of the red coil hilts.
If it, you're saying a heater, right, a regular heater, like that, not a radiator. Not
A radiator also has
an
a,
oil or water radiator.
even an oil one has electrical, it's got something that's creating the heat, which is like a filament, in a sense.
Okay, that Mullen's gonna take us to our Gemara short time, so we gotta go.
Okay, so I have to think about that. Clearly, regarding a lamp, that is the ruling. But however, those lamps that use what's called not the fluorescent. What's the other light they use today?
Incandescent?
No, the new one.
No, you have what is it
You have
called?
incandescent, you have fluorescent, and you have LED.
LED lights are not muktzah because it's not actually, and also fluorescent, by the way. It's just gas. It's not an actual wick.
Okay.
So therefore, that's the chachma of what they have, the Shabbos lamp with the hashgacha, that it's not muktzah. It's because it's actually not a basis it's not a basis for anything. It's not considered a flame, so there's nothing muktzah.
Are you allowed to move the lamp? I thought you
Yeah.
could only move the little thing that put the
Depends how the
cardboard
lamp is
over
made.
it.
If it's an LED, it's not a problem. You can even move it. So I mean, it's klishim lachta le'isser because you turn it on and off.
I don't have anything with LED.
It's like this. You cannot turn it on and off on Shabbos. That's clear because of this the Rabbanon. But it wouldn't make the entire. It's not the same status and category as a flame. So therefore, it wouldn't become like a status of a candle. So if you need to move it for use, you could.
Whereas a floor radiator that has a filament that you could put a piece of something on it and it'll just burst into flames, that might be different. A normal floor radiator
Yeah.
that glows red,
Right.
okay, if you take a tissue and touch it, it's gonna burst into flames.
Right. So with pashas, that would be considered completely muktzah. We had radiators and it heats up the liquid. I mean, at least you can't see anything red heating up.
Right.
It heats up the oil or the water. Now, if you're talking about the heaters that, like those makeshift heaters you put on the floor, which are extremely unsafe for Shabbos anyways, no one should use them.
The electric ones?
Yeah. If a person did use them, the fire would be completely mixed because that would be considered like a flame. Yeah. So you have to move with a shiur. Yeah, it would be different than a fan. It would be the same cases.
Yeah. I have a ceramic heater, little whatever, and it supposedly doesn't get so hot. I left my Crocs in front of it.
Oh my gosh.
They melted. They melted.
On Shabbos.
It wasn't on Shabbos,
okay.
but they melted.
Shabbos. Well.
I'm rethinking where I keep the ceramic heater.
B'Shalach.
Put it in the shul.
I learned in yeshiva, or I think I learned in yeshiva, that we don't wash for shalosh shudas after shkia.
Correct.
Okay. I see a lot of people who do it. In any case, they put out a big spread in Levi Yitzchak.
A big what?
A spread of, a lot of food.
Food, a lot of food,
yeah,
okay.
bread and fruit. So I never,
Shalashudas?
yeah,
They serve shalashudas every week there?
they don't really serve, they put it out, whoever wants takes. Yeah. Anyway, so I never partook of it, and, my shita all the years was never to wash after
What do you mean
skiing.
your shita?
Well, whatever, I mean, this is what I learned, this is what I follow. So, yesterday, somebody came over and Mama gave me a tangerine. And because of his kindness, I ate it. So, do I have to matter a netter?
No, it's forbidden to be done. There's no never here.
It was after, before shiur or
Oh,
after?
before shkia?
No, it was after skiing, for
Of
sure.
course it's also. People don't know. It's not what you learned in yeshiva. That's what everybody's supposed to learn.
Fine. But I see, I mean,
People don't know. It's not.
in Levi Yitzchak, everybody partakes of that. Not everybody, but a lot of people.
But not necessarily after shiur.
Yes, it's definitely.
Well, maybe they washed beforehand. If you wash beforehand, it's not a problem.
Maybe.
But if you didn't wash beforehand, it's a
I know, you didn't show up before me because I used to
Us,
have in mind the bench. Okay, very good. My wife is going to try to impress you today.
What's that?
My wife is going to try to impress you today. She's going to bring you a
Oh.
You feel better, Mazel Tov.
Mishkeach, thank you.